There we go. Sorry about that. Let's do the intro again. Hello and welcome to Code with Brylie. Today we're going to be working on an open source mobile application, cross-platform. The source code is available on GitHub, github.com/flutterfriends/gender-sentiment. We're Apache 2 licensed, and we're creating an application to promote inclusivity and comfort by collecting anonymous gender sentiment data. I have the basic app working and have naturally uncovered a bug. You know, there's always room for improvement. The further along you get in an app, you end up finding more details. When the app is running in portrait mode, we have this survey app and it displays 2 rows of buttons. A row with 3 gender choices, female, male, and non-binary, and 4 sentiment choices, like a continuum of how was your experience that day. And both of those rows are overflowing. We get this error, right overflowed by 126 pixels. 100 pixels. It looks like one of the buttons is completely off screen and the other ones are partially. So we're going to have to take a look at this. That's the problem. And there's usually multiple possible solutions. And so I was just kind of brainstorming here with Gemini about how we could fix this issue. Let me bring Gemini over here. And because we'll probably use Gemini or ChatGPT during this session to assist with the code. So the first idea I had was to require the user to put the app in portrait mode. I've seen this, for example, on games where the experience of the game, it just won't play. Sorry, in landscape mode, it won't play well in portrait mode. I'm probably going to mix those two up over and over. So similarly, this survey doesn't currently work in portrait mode, but it's not really like an interactive game where you have a lot of levels and progression, and we just have 2 rows of buttons. So I don't think that requiring landscape mode is ideal. Although one of our goals here is to display this in a kiosk next to a door of a community space. And that kiosk will probably be in landscape mode. So that was my first idea, but then with Bard or Gemini, we came up with several other button options that may just be more conventional, also help me learn more about how Flutter works. So scrollable view might work to allow horizontal scrolling. You can swipe and scroll, but so each thing has trade-offs. I would prefer that the buttons are immediately visible, that you don't have to kind of scroll off the screen to select your sentiment. And that could bias, or your gender, that could bias the results. People could feel obligated to select one of the traditional binary gender identities and might feel this is excluding non-binary people. Could take that as a sort of a suggestion or insult. And we want to be pretty careful and conscious about the perception, and we're trying to promote inclusivity, so we should include literally the buttons on the screen, I believe. Secondarily, like the sentiments, hopefully, and without trying to skew the results, hopefully people will be having great experiences. But if the button's off the screen, I think the likelihood is that people will select the visible options. And even the way we sort these could affect the survey results, in honesty. If we put the ones like people might select the most convenient or the one on towards the most left most often. I don't know specifically if that will be the case, but I've noticed that other survey apps have different sentiment layouts where they start with the positive sentiments and then the negative sentiments on the right. So there may be some design choices that are underlying that decision. So all that to say, I don't think the scrollable solution is going to be a good one. The button sizing could be an easy one. Expanded widgets distribute this space proportionally within the portrait view. They're getting smushed, so there's not much to expand, but the sizing could be the differentiating factor. I want them just to be big enough that your fingers, can press them. A row with main axis alignment space even aligns evenly within the available space in portrait mode, potentially saving overflow. So this could automatically control that, or conditionally display the buttons based on orientation. So this one was a bit of a, not kind of a hallucination, but it's not like a solution. I think that most engineers or humans would suggest that I conditionally display the buttons, because that would bias our survey. We want to display all of the buttons, but perhaps we could conditionally display the button labels I added there. If people are familiar with these symbols, I think this metaphor is like Venus, Mars. I think a lot of people are, and these smileys are sort of common. That could be a simple solution, just to hide the labels in portrait mode. I don't know. So the first, anytime I approach a software development task, I have to think a bit laterally and divergently. Think, what are the options here? Just give it some initial thought without, at the risk of thinking too broadly. I do that sometimes too, and I've gotten feedback to the effect that, well, sometimes you take a simple task and you kind of blow it up and think too much about it, which I get that sentiment, but I think overall it's an important step, even for small tasks, to think, what are my options, and not just dive into the first thing that comes to mind. Because as I said, the first thing that came to my mind was that the app would display like a screen or popover that says, please rotate your device. And, maybe that's a good usability thing, and maybe it's easy to implement, but I don't think either of those are true. So I think that the better usability thing would be something that the thing just works right out of the box and doesn't require the user to take any other action to see the options. So that narrows my choices down. Hiding the labels or trying smaller labels. Let's dig into the code. But again, everything has trade-offs. So it's, I don't want to get this analysis paralysis. But what happens if I just change the label font size and icon font size on mobile devices? What does it look like even if I just half them? Roughly. And save that. Hey, everything fits. And look at that. That's like 2 lines of code changed because I used these variables. I didn't have to go through my whole app and make that change. All right, so that could be just job done, They're still readable. It's getting close. Now this is weird. Oh. All right, there we go. To the edges, but it doesn't look bad. Now this is I don't know the screen dimensions or how conventional this is. So it's an iPhone 15 emulator. I'm wondering if this would work on smaller screens. I think we're back in that same boat. But I'll go with this change. So actually, the first thing I need to do is create a branch. And there could be some subtlety here. I could have different font sizes for portrait and landscape mode. And there could be a default Flutter thing that gives me more safety here to prevent overflow. Also, less padding. All of these have, this is a repeated variable as well. So we have this button and padding inside of the button, horizontal and vertical padding. You know, I could tighten it up a bit. So let me see here. This is an example of why you kind of want to avoid using literal values throughout your app and try to use named variables, not only to tell yourself what this thing is doing, but that you can reuse it. Let's see what it says. So it kind of knew I was going with button padding, but this should be like a dictionary. So I've already, let's see. $20.15. So there we go. We got H padding and V padding. 2015, and GPT was able to kind of infer that. So let's go back here and find all of those. What is this? This is just putting padding around our rows, but we're looking just inside the buttons. So here we go. Button horizontal padding would be here, boom, and then button vertical padding would be here. There we are, and we'll just repeat that. And then what that'll allow us to do is just to tweak this, get the whole thing at once. Well, this is, whoops, wrong button. Button horizontal padding, button vertical padding. Let's see how long it takes GPT to kind of, or Copilot to catch on to this pattern. So there we go. Now it took 3 times, but we're at 2 of the above horizontal and vertical patterns. Padding. Oh, but now it forgot it. So let me just remind it. And there's only 5 buttons, but you can see this literal value spread throughout my code. And if I want to change it, you can see how tedious it is. I have to go to all these places, and then if I wanted to tweak it again, I would have to go to all the places again. Now we won't have any change. I'll save it. It's because it's using the same values, but now I can change it to like 10 and 5. Let's see what happens. Save that. That's good. So it kind of tightened it up and moved them away from the edges. I think these are still on a phone going to be the right size for your fingers, so it'll be still user-friendly. All right, so a couple of improvements there. Using named variables instead of literal values, and that way, especially for a thing that repeats throughout the code, again, it has the double effect of telling you what it's doing, even though it might seem obvious that I'm inside of a button, but even from here, if I'm looking at this literal value, I had to kind of work my way up the code and say, oh, I'm inside of a button here. Whereas this thing just tells me, this is the button horizontal pattern. I don't have to kind of like say, what's going on? What's the context? Yeah, cool. And there's probably a refactor I can do, since this is really, most of this code is just repeating the button horizontal pattern. I could probably make this whole thing button padding, for example, right? And it's constant and it's repeated. But yeah, and that'll make my code less verbose. The DR, don't repeat yourself kind of thing. It's also, you know, not about being too obsessed with that, but readability matters. Readability counts. Let's just say button padding. And we will make this constant up here. There we go. Then we can use that as well. Let's just kind of take it one step further. So for all of these buttons, I'll just use button padding. Padding, button padding, we got it. There, and these styles, this is also repeated. This is something I could repeat. I could create as a function that takes essentially the active and inactive colors as arguments. That way, at least it would hide the conditional check, this ternary operator. But I don't know if that's it's being, ternary operators are already pretty kind of terse or succinct or kind of like straightforward. So probably don't need to go that far. Yeah, and this is just a one-line function. So I think we're about as dense as we can get. I don't want to get too obsessed with it, but the button padding was kind of an easy win. So we'll just remove a few lines of code there. Yeah. And actually, what I can do is just padding. And find all the padding so I can just kind of visually scroll where I see button padding. Button padding. This is button padding. This is button padding. And this is button padding. Because as you can see, these sort of the declarative style of app, it gets very large. This is all a return statement within a function. It's returning this material app. So from line 107, it's crazy long, right? To line, it's almost 200 lines, about 150 lines. So that's quite a lot. So shaving off a few of these lines, I think, helps maintainability. And then because this is a declarative framework, it makes it very easy to compose and to kind of break these out into reusable components. So it could be that I have like a survey button class that encapsulates all of this logic, all of these lines, and then takes arguments for the things that change. So the display value. I'm not going to go that far exactly right now, but that's the general idea of composability here, right there. Very nice. I like that. So let's go ahead and commit these changes. Then, so that's just a basic thing. The next level I would like to take it to is to change the values conditionally based on orientation, perhaps screen orientation. But the initial refactor was to consolidate. The button styles and make them smaller. And I'm in my branch, so I just want to make sure that we're not committing to main. I'll go ahead and open a pull request as a draft and see if I get some help from the some of that's self-explanatory, but create draft from Copilot helps you fill in your pull requests. Information is kind of helpful. So we got consolidate button styles and make smaller. Number 6. So it just took the commit message, generated some text. Now I'm learning Dart and Flutter as I go. So I'm very novice at these tools. So I'm relying on code assistance, as you can see, and going to get some help where possible from Gemini, and see if Gemini is a good coding assistant today. We'll try that. So to do that, I'm just going to go to this one here. So I fixed the initial issue, that the overflow. They're not overflowing anymore. Let's just see what Gemini says about this. I'm used to doing this with GPT. Sometimes if I just give these models some information, they'll make, potential enhancements. They'll make good suggestions. Media query. Oh, that's exactly. To adjust the sizes and font sizes. Padding and available based on the available screen space. Very good idea. and device orientation. That's so cool. Consider using a layout builder for more fine-grained control over the layout, especially if you need to adapt the UI for different screen sizes and orientations. It sounds like a more advanced thing, but something I'll have to learn about pretty soon. Screen readers. Ensure the buttons are properly labeled for screen readers using the semantics label. So this is actually an enhancement I'm going to do soon. I should mention this should be done first early in the development process. It's often an afterthought, and I'm showing that anti-pattern here because I haven't thought about semantics. And also the button colors, they don't contrast well enough. So okay, and this is great. It's offering suggestions. I should read this aloud, but let me know if you'd like to explore any specific implementations for the potential enhancements. Okay, so first let's say, let me think here for a second. I want to create this as a GitHub issue. Project. Let's create a GitHub issue for the following enhancements so I can prioritize it in the project backlog. One reason I'm checking out Gemini more is it lets me use the microphone on the desktop, like in the web browser. I like ChatGPT. It's got them, you can talk to it. It's these voice user interfaces. I think that's where the future of software is going to reside. We're going to be using these voice user interfaces quite a lot. So I'm going to invest some time in learning about that. Yeah, so improve the button accessibility for screen readers. Currently, the buttons in our Flutter application may not have sufficient descriptive labels for screen readers. This creates a barrier for users with visual impairments. To enhance accessibility, we should review the button labels to ensure they effectively convey the button's actions and purpose. Tasks. Audit the existing button labels carefully. Review text and icons used in each button. Determine if they provide enough context for screen reader users to understand the button's function. Yeah. Add semantics label to the elevated buttons. Test with a screen reader. This is interesting. VoiceOver on iOS or TalkBack on Android. And I wonder how you test this usability on Mac OS with the simulator. I'll have to learn about all that stuff. I think that's why it's often an afterthought. It's like, well, it's not trivial to test, but that's not to be making excuses. Yeah. So yeah, semantics label right there. There we go. It's got a code example. WCAG for labeling. Providing means to toggle enlarge text for users with low vision. See, this is a good example also of an accessibility feature that could conflict with the bug I'm fixing, because this the text would overflow again. So yeah, this is an example of everything having trade-offs, and why you don't want to get paralyzed making decisions. You kind of need to go forward, but you could realize, oh, that was the wrong decision. So if somebody needs to amplify the text, enlarge the text, they'll be right back in this situation. Now, granted, this survey is intended to be deployed on a kiosk, and honestly, I don't think, I'm going to try to publish it, but I don't think people will download it and be submitting it. It wouldn't make sense because the data is stored locally, and an organization usually wants to collect this information. However, we could put a button here, font size, large font size, normal font size, so to speak. Normal might be a bit larger, medium, or small, giving the users control at the kiosk. They can touch that. Likewise, the screen reader in this particular app doesn't quite make sense because it's, again, intended to be deployed at a kiosk at the doorway of a place where there won't necessarily be a screen reader, but it could be potentially enabled on the tablet. I don't know how that will work. Nonetheless, I think it's an important practice, so I'm going to label it regardless, and I could see an organization, a community organization for visually impaired people who might deploy a kiosk with a screen reader enabled at their doorway. So there's other issues that come out of that, such as the need for Braille. Well, the screen reader should negate that, but I don't know how a kiosk tablet would interact with a screen reader, or you would use voice commands, I suppose. Yeah, again, this you can see I don't have much context here and experience here, not only learning Flutter, but just in terms of thinking about accessibility. So this is all new territory for me. So bear with me while I'm sort of learning all this stuff. Come along for the ride. It's interesting. All right. So anyway, I'm going to put this issue in the backlog. And the description is the description, so I don't need to like say, hey, this is the description. Priority is an interesting one. The toggling in large text for low vision users, that's a good idea. All right, so we have a new issue in our backlog. If you'd like to check it out, it's issue number 7. Flutter Friends, Gender Sentiment, issue 7. There we go, on GitHub. So now that it's in the backlog, I can let go of that. I don't have to remember it. It makes it easier for my brain. Now there was another one here that I might, yes. So this one is one I've noticed already, that the colors may have issues with contrast. So let me double check here. For example, even the default color on the white background, semi-white, may not be high contrast, especially when we reduce the font size. But then there's a yellow background for these gender buttons, and the sentiment buttons have different colored backgrounds, and you can see like awful has lower contrast because the red is a darker color with the dark font. Bad, sort of good. Good is also, I think none of these are great, except great is kind of good. So yeah, we'd have to think about the contrast. And I don't think that would be its own task, so you can kind of just focus on this one idea. Yeah, and the data structure might be like a dictionary of, because you have to, the font has to be contrasting against the background, so you need that both font color and background color. And then you might want to think from a UX perspective, is like, do you want the font colors to change, or should they be static, and then the background colors just all be adjusted to have good contrast, as well as pushing the font color darker? You could push the background colors lighter generically. Yeah, so that's why this is its own issue. Interesting. Okay, so let's use my voice so I don't have to type so much. Thank you. Let's create an issue for the color contrast enhancement so that I can focus on that in a separate session. For example, the color contrast may be as simple as defining a darker text color and ensuring that all of the background colors, specifically for the selected states of the buttons, are lighter, and measuring that contrast on the WCAG AA or AAA standard. Whoops. Well, anyway, it has the context up above. And this has got to be relating to Flutter. Improve button contrast for WCAG AAA compliance. Ooh, AAA, yeah, we can do it though. And what's the... Thank you. And in case it's relevant, since we're building a Flutter application, we want to try to achieve the WCAG AAA compliance, but using any Flutter tooling that's available. I'm not sure what that would specifically be, but perhaps there's a Flutter accessibility checker or something in the Flutter dev tools that could be of assistance that we could mention in the task description. Please revise the issue to describe any relating tools or practices for making Flutter applications visually accessible, specifically relating to color. Contrast. Because the accessibility could be a deep dive, right? There are many aspects to accessibility, including visual impairments and auditory guides or spoken text, screen readers, even just for non-visually impaired users, contrast matters, all of it. And so we have this idea that I've learned a little bit about called the curb cut effect, where, for example, on sidewalks where they encounter the street at the curb where you're walking, a lot of times the sidewalks would just be really steep kind of drop, a small kind of cliff in your path. And most people didn't really notice, and a lot of the urban designers didn't really notice that was an issue. But as soon as you're, in a wheelchair or even on a skateboard or rollerblades or any other devices that are emerging, like these scooters and automated delivery bots, those curb drops or cliffs, they're actually impediments that go kind of unnoticed. And just like we have an awareness now that we need ramps in addition to stairs, we know that we need to have sort of slopes on the intersections of sidewalks and streets that are smooth, gradiated, and no abrupt change. And the curb cut effect means that when we think about accessibility as like a first class concern, it actually benefits groups of people who we didn't realize needed or would benefit from that, like rollerbladers or skateboarders or scooter riders or even bicyclists who don't like to have to hop their tires over these curbs, right? It makes our whole commute smoother for many people. So button color contrast matters on many levels. That's why accessibility is such an important consideration. Let's see. So there didn't seem to be much accessibility tools. Okay, so there's an accessibility tools package we can investigate. Nice. All right. All right. Descriptive labels for the button and then the color labels. So these are related, but maybe separate. I can decide if I handle them both in the same session. Or, for example, somebody else could take these issues now that they're on GitHub. Or if they should be handled separately. So we're just going to pop that on there. And to that note, Flutter focus. Oh, I see what they mean by that. Well, anyway. It's what is Gemini saying? This is the revised issue with a focus on Flutter. And priority doesn't need to necessarily be in the description. Color schemes dynamic. Benefits, curb cut effect. Very cool. I think these are pretty good. And what I'm remembering now is that since we're on GitHub, I need to signal that these are good. These are first line enhancement, and that we would like some help if people are interested in doing some Flutter stuff. Right, that one I'm working on, so I should mark that I'm doing that. So I think these are good first issues and enhancements. I don't know, it's hard to tell what's a good first issue for me in Flutter zone, but I'll assign myself here. This is an enhancement, and I might decide later to have labels for usability or accessibility, but for now I'm just going to stick with the default labels, keep it simple. All right, so we do have some improvements here. Oh. And what I'm thinking is, in the short term, I can fix the button overflow issue with this approach that I've already started down. But now that I've gone further into the accessibility zone, and particularly relating to the font size accessibility, I realize that this approach may need to be revised. But what I'll do is create a follow-up issue that allows users to select the font size from 2 or 3 choices, and that's going to inherently affect the portrait mode display. We'll reintroduce this overflow bug, so we'll have to think more holistically at that point. Today I just want to get this at least to a state where I can demonstrate this, and I'd like to publish this on the App Store so that the people at this community organization can download that, try it, and see if it's even a good idea. Trying to get the feedback early, see what could be improved, or throw it away. If we don't feel like it's a good idea, that's okay too. But we have this overarching initiative to increase gender diversity at this community space, and the first step in that is to see where we are. You got to first measure the issue before you can kind of make the change. Essentially, you won't know if you're changing anything if you don't know where you are, right? You won't know if you're making any progress. And there's some other details here, such as we're going to have to experiment with different types of changes to see how they impact the diversity and sentiment, such as hosting different types of events or having different accommodations. And so this survey actually collects 3 pieces of data. We collect the gender, the sentiment, and then there's a timestamp. And the timestamp lets us correlate the submissions with particular events and activities, such as a campaign, like a social media campaign or something like that. We can say, wow, that social media campaign actually really attracted, or changed the gender distribution or changed the sentiment. Or that event had really poor sentiment, while this event had really good sentiment. So maybe we can focus on that type of thing. So this is extending on an idea that's already out there, which is just the idea of exit surveys. How was your experience today? And there's several apps that are doing this, doing exit surveys on how was it, happy or not? It's one example that we're using. Are you happy or not? But then we're adding this second layer of getting a little bit more detailed demographic information. We might be able to incorporate other demographics using this same kind of pattern. And there are more sophisticated surveying tools like Feedbackly. We're doing a little bit of comparative analysis that exist, and we may end up adopting one of those. But in the meantime, I thought, hey, this would be a cool Flutter project. Let me try it out. I'm learning Flutter. Let's use our skills. So all that said, we've got some issues in the backlog for accessibility. And the first enhancement that I think would be good to include here, now it's a bit difficult. I should mention one other thing is this about linguistic accessibility or localization. This is English, the community's auxiliary language. Pretty much everyone that enters this space we assume is conversant in English. It's sort of like the international auxiliary language right now, so it's a good first start, but we may decide that it should be localized. The reason I bring that up is that will affect the label length. And all of these factors come into play when you're trying to make things fit on the screen in a non-wrapping manner. So I think this solution about changing the font size is kind of a naive one. It's not taking into account some common practices in app development, accessibility and localization, namely. So this is a short-term solution just to get the thing to work in portrait mode today, I realize. And again, you don't want to get stuck in this analysis thing where you are not able to make, progress, but everything has trade-offs. So let's, though, while I'm on that mode, add a localization support. Let me double check here. So buttons overflow in portrait mode, render flex overflow is what I'm working on. Let me double check. Color contrast, improve button accessibility for screen readers. I think I should add a option, so 2 options here. Given the current focus on accessibility, I'm realizing the importance of users being able to have accessibly sized text. In other words, being able to select the font size, such as between small, medium, and large values with a 3-button chooser. I would like to create a GitHub issue that will help us focus on allowing users to select an accessible font size while recognizing that we will have gone full circle if we allow users to change the font size. We will have reintroduced the button overflow issue that I'm just fixing by reducing the font size. So at that point, we will need to find another solution to prevent the overflow. However, it would be better to focus on that solution in the context of allowing users to change the font size. That way I can move on from the current task. Please create a GitHub issue describing the idea of giving users a choice between 3 font sizes that would change the label fonts for the buttons and address any overflow issues that may occur. All right, let's see what we get. So we're gonna implement user selectable font sizes with overflow mitigation. All right, that's pretty good. To enhance accessibility, we want to provide users with the ability to choose between small, medium, and large font sizes for button labels. However, directly increasing font sizes would reintroduce the overflow issue that was previously addressed. And I'll link to the GitHub issue here. We need a robust solution that balances accessibility and layout. So yeah, this is the key of the balance and the trade-offs and timing. You have to think of the timing. Right now, I'm just in the prototype phase. I need to get initial feedback. So it's not the time probably to go into really holistic and long-term solutions when this app might be a throwaway app. I don't know if it's even going to be used. So yeah, it's pretty good. And I won't read the whole thing aloud, but we'll go ahead and copy the text. But it is open source. So I won't necessarily delete the code. It's going to stay on GitHub, so it could potentially be used for other organizations. I'm just thinking that we need to decide at this community organization if we'll use the app for our gender diversity initiative. Cool. And nonetheless, these are important skills to have as a mobile or an application developer. All right, so has some tasks. This is really good and important for developers. You get a task, it should sort of describe what the expectations are. Investigate layout strategies to accommodate different font sizes without button overflow. That's a clear goal. You could try wrapping, and it's even scrollable. Now, I don't think the scrollable is again a good one because that we would, if they wrap, that's fine. But if they scroll off the screen, I don't think that's a good choice. Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and post this sort of as it is. Acknowledge the potential trade-offs between maximizing the visible buttons and maintaining legibility in larger font sizes, performance, usability, and considerations. I'll say ensure, let's see, this is visibility, I suppose. We want to ensure that all the buttons are visible on the screen when changing the font size to avoid biasing the survey results. It might just be that if you push the button off the screen, people won't select it. They might not scroll or even know that they can scroll if it's not visible, for example. So then all of a sudden we could be getting, people who needed bigger font sizes having a worse sentiment rating or better sentiment rating, depending on the sorting of the buttons. And that would introduce bias into the survey. So hey, thanks, Dota. How are you doing? Don't be awful, be great. That's great life advice, yeah. Oh, dark mode, I just realized could be a good improvement here because it's hard to read your font on the video screen. Don't be awful, be great. You'd use, oh, I see, for awful and great. Yeah, different words. Now, that's a good point. We did have this discussion. And we were like, what? We actually did some research on this, but it's not a simple thing. But yeah, what would you use? Too emotionally charged. Well, okay, so the sentiment is emotional. And we're asking people how their experience was. And at the extremes, maybe they had a really negative experience. And we need a word for that. this is inherently an emotional question. How was your experience? How are you feeling? But yeah, let's see. Let me see if I can find this research. This is an important consideration. Let me think where this was. History, perhaps. Good, very good is obvious positives. Good, great. Yeah, okay, so there's other considerations here, though, because at the beginning of this session and this current task I'm working on is about fixing a bug. I'll introduce it again by, well, actually, all right, here we go. Very good. Let's try that. Good, very good. And why didn't that work? Why didn't that, maybe I have to hot reload that. There we go. See, you're starting to squish, starting to get squished. And bad and very bad. My mouse. Something with this Mac when I'm displaying, streaming. Bad, very bad, good, very good. And let's see what it does, because I just decreased the font size here. So it's getting squished, but they fit. They still fit. Poor and very poor. Well, here's where you're getting too squished. Okay, then you're like, so it's not as simple. Everything has trade-offs. The first trade-off is that it spills off the screen. So we've reintroduced the bug because our labels are too long. The second trade-off with unsatisfactory is that this is an international community, and most of the people, English is a second language as far as I can tell. We haven't, to my knowledge, surveyed that, but just by my experience in the place, people coming from all over the place. And even being based in Finland, English is a second language here. So we have to have very short and common words. That's one. And then this is inherently, we're asking about people's feeling or sentiment. So we're not trying to avoid emotional words. But yeah, poor and very poor. Yeah. How was your experience? Poor. Very poor. That'll fit on the screen. But also poor can mean like rich and poor, so it's not simple. Let me find this research paper that we used as a reference here. Maybe it was sent here. Because we did look into this. Okay, no, this is where we disagree, because this even number makes people choose. We care about the sentiment, good or bad, positive or negative. The neutral answer, the meh answer, is kind of people can get out of making a choice, and that's not helpful here. Also, then we want you to make a choice. What are you leaning more towards? We don't want the meh. We're not trying to collect meh. Overall, you just got to make a choice. You got to fall overall positive or overall negative. We need to know your sentiment. And the second thing is we're going to display these. Then if you don't care, or if you're apathetic, don't submit the thing. I don't know. Don't submit the survey. But yeah, like this is not black and white, but yeah. because we're essentially asking for a thumbs up and thumbs down or down, not a thumb sideways. But we're having a little bit more, and we're also back to the same problem. We have limited screen space in portrait mode, and we want people to make a yes or no, up or down choice, not have a third choice. We don't want, like the gender has 3 choices because we're non-binary there, but the sentiment, we're sort of in a gradiated binary mindset. We want to know is it a positive or negative sentiment, generally speaking. So just have to fall one side or the other. You have to break that symmetry. Hey, thanks. Long live Chow for the follow. Yeah, right. Neutral is like, what do we do with that? I don't know. Because we want to know, like, did people have a good experience at this event? Or after we had this sort of campaign or this outreach effort, did people's experiences improve? I guess if you get a bunch of mehs, that could be that could be a signal, of course. But I think it's just slightly easier to say, hey, just take a couple extra calories and decide up or down. It just takes a little bit more thought and helps us. Oh no, spam account. Ban incoming. Okay, thanks. At least you're on but yeah, okay, we'll leave these labels. These are cool labels. I'll see if I can find this survey. I'll ask my friend Kat. All right, I'll see if I can get this link here. YouTube switched to that because people were only responding to the polls anyway. Yeah, that's right. And then didn't YouTube remove the thumbs down? There was some controversy around that. All right, first I'm going to just try a sentiment scale reveals. A Google search. Let me just do this over here. Where is my browser that goes over on this side? All right, here we are. So here's my Google search results. We get some sort of SEO spam. Stanford 21 lexicons for sentiment, effect, and connotation. It's a PDF. I don't like opening PDF links. I don't understand. Wait, which one? Thumbs down was a controversy. Probably to avoid negativity on the platform. Yeah, that's to that point. They have to read their own comment sections. That's a really good point because the comments is where these things start to get really messy. There was this really nice depiction. This is pretty cool. Wheel of Emotions. We have another game that we're developing. We have a mind test mod, and we used this as a sort of reference for helping children discuss their feelings, like developing emotional intelligence. Here it is, the sentiment scale. This is the research, actually. Okay, so it's actually an individual capitalist had this as well. I'm trying to find the original research, but okay, this seems like an SEO spam website, so apologies if it's, yeah. How many partners did it say? How many partners? We and 136 TCF vendors and 62 ad partners. Okay, so that's not so bad. But I've seen some of these that are like 1,000 or 700 partners. It's like, dude, what a mess. A legitimate interest. What does that even mean? They're not asking for your consent, but are using your personal data on a basis of their legitimate interest. They are legitimately interested in selling my data. Is that what that means? All right, so this is actually pretty cool though. YouGov.com is where it was originally published. Perhaps. What is YouGov.com? Good grief, good grief. EU, woes of cookie consent. Along those lines, all right, so I'm going to catch back up to that point. The red comment sections, yeah, the comment sections need to be cleaned up. Manager had an idea of retrospectives, actually. Along these lines, how are you feeling this sprint went? Question. Very good. And are there any demographic questions? Because one of the ideas of this project is that we can really easily adapt it to other use cases. Man, I got to fix the font contrast on the chat. So it's easier to read. I'll have to figure that out. Hey, Daniel, keep on cooking. All right, what are we cooking? Just the code? Yeah, so we're going to keep on cooking the code. Thumbs up, thumbs down where everyone votes. Yeah, that would be a good one. Let's create a small app for that. And there are, I guess you wouldn't need other demographic information for that one, but just lazy and don't want to code it. Yeah, we could throw that one together. Let's do that. Well, let's fix this little thing here and let's try that one. That's a good idea. Let's do it. Let me just close this bug out. So we'll go with your labels, although it's not typically something you want to do when fixing a bug. You kind of want to focus on the bug that you're working. This was the issue. Where is my issue? Buttons overflow in portrait mode. But you know, poor and good. All right, I think that's good. Good feedback. And just to wrap it back up, where are these? So here's good. And then we have very good, really good, quite good, very good. So yeah, these rank. That good is typically perceived as less positive than very good. That would make sense. You know, that aligns pretty significant. But all of these good, great, very good, superb, awesome, incredible, fantastic, brilliant, outstanding, excellent, and perfect, they're all sort of ranked very tightly. But then on the other hand, we have poor. Poor is here and very poor. It wasn't part of the survey, and I think that's why we went with bad and very bad. You can see they have a bit more spread here, but the bad is their bimodal distributions, and some people rank bad as the same as very bad, which is kind of confusing. I don't know how they did that, but bad is generally, you know, about the same. There's like 4 main humps, right? We got this extreme, and then 2 sort of in the middle. Positive and negative, and we don't want the meh. We're not trying to use meh words like mediocre, average, fair, not bad. We're really asking people to sort of swing one way or the other. Help us out here. So very bad, and I think that's why we went with a very bad and bad, because they're less letters. So this is a bit more spacious, and I think I'll actually revert to very bad and bad, because bad and good, I think in my mind, are more related than poor and good. Semantically, I think they're more closely related. So yeah, I'm gonna do that. Bad and good, just on second thought. Very bad. Yeah. So the change here needs to be reflected in the enum, our sentiment enum. All right. Yeah, I need to fix this chat. Oh boy, that's not what I'm trying to do here. What am I trying to do? Anonymous, but someone might speak their vote. Well, perfect curve is higher than the others. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, and that's another thing. We're not expecting perfection, so we don't want to kind of introduce that sort of a mindset. I don't like anything. I think perfection is an illusion. No, it's cool. This is a community project so we're all able to contribute to the decision. Let me just map these enum values so that they're matching the labels. I think this is a good one. We're balancing, the brevity of the labels, the common, simple words, the more conversational words, and the sentiment, I think, has the right balance. So it's in the right columns of that distribution. Pilfers, welcome. I always thought the alternative uses of poor were odd. I grew up poor, and while it was bad, it was always fun to hear about poor performance. Yeah, that's true. So let's stick with good and bad and just have these vary modifiers. Where did I define this? So let me go to the definition here. Sentiment, there we go. All right, so we got bad, very bad. And I think if I just say rename, can I rename symbol? Oh boy. Null check operator used on a null value. Maybe that's just a little preemptive. Let me just stop the thing. I'll relaunch the app once I make this change. I think that's going to be the problem. The constant name very bad isn't a lower camel case. Okay, so then there's conventions. I'm kind of used to Python a bit, where we're using this, what do you call that, snake case, but we're going to use the lower camel case. Oops, and I just remember, I got to rename the symbol, and that will then do it in all the places. Cool. So I think, yeah, this is a great improvement. It's balancing a lot of factors. I think it's doing it in a good way. So, succinctness, shortness, of the label, easy to read, easy to understand by people who are not native speakers. We're still forcing the sentiment choice. Very cool. Thanks for the feedback. I appreciate it. And then, well, let's see if it's breaking in other places. Oh boy. Okay, so any place I see this, very bad, very bad, very bad. I'll just put very bad. Normally the rename symbol does that for me, but then I had somehow broke it. Okay, let's try this again. So, but then what we're going to do, cooking wise, is I was actually going to try to use the media query to change these font sizes dynamically. Let me just commit this change though, because that was a great suggestion. It's a little ironic, but the language is a pretty very bad way to communicate. Yeah, language is not very, it's very flexible, but yeah, that leads to a lot of ambiguity. But I think that's part of why humans in particular are so good with abstraction and things like that, because the language and all this communication and collaboration and cooperation has helped force us to sort of develop more abstraction and ways of interpreting, fuzzy, noisy signals. Flutter has them. Media queries and mobile apps. Oh yeah. It is. Flutter is heavily inspired by the mobile web. In fact, the Dart language was originally designed as a replacement for JavaScript, and then Flutter's borrowing a lot of conventions from web development, partially to make it an easy onboarding process, but I think also it's like not to reinvent the wheel. They're already focusing on reinventing a lot of things like the rendering pipeline, and they're not using native widgets and stuff like that. So they're choosing their battles, and I think the battle is in the mind, where they want the developer experience to be conventional and simple and have rich tooling and all that good stuff. So let's say change labels. Very good. Commit. Block is nice. Okay, I haven't worked on that one. Monofonts. And the state management I'm using here is the provider. I used provider because the Flutter docs said it was like one of the easiest to start with, and I didn't want to go all in on block yet. So, and since this is such a small app, I think we have time in this session to make a new little app to at least display the up and down votes for a sprint review session. but I know there's a lot of complexity that emerges even in seemingly simplistic apps. Okay, so let's go back into Gemini Zone. Gemini Zone. Well, where's Gemini? Infographic. So we got our sentiment here. And actually, if I just pop Gemini over there, it's going to be easier for me to find. So yeah, good discussion. I don't know if I'm signed in, but yeah, you gotta have some kind of app involved in your retrospectives. Of course, we're using one app. I forget what the name of it is. Retrospection app. Retrospective app. It's not even listed here. Retrium, actually, yeah, Retrium. All right, 1 second, I got to get my power supply. Be right back. My battery's low. All right, cool. So now I have some battery. And where did the chat go? Oh my gosh. There we go. Deployment awful. Keep in mind, my goal is to produce things in 4 to 8 hours, worst case, if I have to code. Yeah, that's a good point. I think I've already spent probably 4 hours on this app. And then the deal with apps and things, as you know, is they grow. They start as a small seed and they branch off. And I've already got 4 issues open. Oh my gosh. All right. So yeah, let's see if we can, let's take a look at these media query to see if we can adjust the font size dynamically. So let me use my voice here. Okay, I've got the issues in the backlog. Let's take a look at one more improvement using media query to control the label font size and potentially the button horizontal and vertical padding. I've got 4 placeholder variables at the top of the app, which I'll paste below, that are defining static values for the font sizes and padding. How would I adapt this code to use media queries to either check to check the device orientation and use alternate values based on the orientation, while also taking into account potentially the screen size, whether this is a tablet or mobile device, for example. All right, so we're going to do that and hold shift and then paste in those values. And I do have a few more, so it's nice that I move these into named variables that I can then target. I do have a few more of those sort of literal values scattered through the app. There's like this, I would call this just general padding that goes between rows, or wraps the rows, for example, keeps them off the edges of the screen. Maybe I don't need a placeholder variable for that. All right, so we do have the material, and then we're going to override widget build media query. So you have to do this in the build context. If it's portrait, then we have that. We'll create a, all right. The thing is then, I can create separate variables for portrait and landscape values. Okay. And then in my code, I use a ternary operator. Hey, Pilfers, thanks for stopping by. I'm sorry, I already dipped, but come back in a bit. Currently having ads, can't hear you, so okay. All right, so this is looking pretty clean. All right, so what do you think? Should we worry about tablet size for now? It will, the initial goal and thinking is to deploy this on a tablet, but I'm developing it locally here on a mobile simulator just so I can work on one screen. It's not necessarily, anything relating to how I'm going to deploy it. Yeah. Yeah, so essentially these need to be defined now. They need to be moved. The button H padding, button V padding need to be defined. I think within the build context, because you can only get this media query in the build because it comes from the context. All right, so we'll move those. This is gonna be a bit tricky. I might be pushing it too far. We're gonna try it though. We're gonna try it. I've committed and pushed my changes here, so we're good to go. And I got a pull request in progress. So at the very least, we can commit to the changes we've made so far, changing the button labels and tweaking the font size, the initial font size. Okay, so where's our build? So here's the build method. It gets the context kiosk state, and we're using the provider, and I'm just calling it kiosk state. There's probably a better way of doing that. So value of local variable is portal isn't used. Okay, so yeah, we're gonna get those all, and then you can create separate variables for the portrait and landscape values. Those I can just define here as kind of global. Portrait label font size. Portrait icon font size. Landscape icon font size. Portrait button H padding. Landscape button H padding. Portrait button V padding. Landscape button V padding. All right, so we got those. I will then delete these in a minute, or I can do that now, I suppose, and break the app. Because then I'll need to redefine the label font size, icon size, conditional logic, label font size. I have to use the isPortrait variable to apply the correct values, and that needs to happen. Then that provides a little bit of problem here with this edge insets. Needs to be defined inside of the build context. All right, so let's go back there. And I'm sure there's better ways to organize this code. Again, I'm just learning all of this. So any suggestions are welcome, seriously. All right, let's then define double label font size equals isPortrait. So yeah, we'll copy this in. Double label font size isPortrait, and then use the portrait label font size. Otherwise, use default to landscape. All right. Button H padding and button V padding. Double button V padding isPortrait, portrait V padding. Otherwise, that. Now button H padding. What's the deal here? Invalid constant value, Dart, invalid constant. Oh, this can't be. I think you can do final though. Or yeah, you can't. I can set final. This is going to change at runtime, so I can't define it as like a build time or a compile time constant. I have to say at runtime this will not change afterwards. Cool. Forgot to make the project with TypeScript. Oh well, too late now. Yeah, you should try it in Dart. Flare Dart. It's actually a really good experience, especially if you're enjoying TypeScript. All right, so then our icon font size, I need to do the same basically. Oh, where did we go? So screen width and screen height. Oh, I see. If we need to think about for tablets, but honestly, yeah, nested conditionals. I think I'll just not worry about the. This is going to bite me later, but let's just take one step towards his portrait and his landscape optimizations. Then I need these icon ones. Button expanding, label font size, icon font size, double icon font size, font size. There we go. It's the same idea. There we go. Button expanding button, V padding, and then what's missing down here? Icon font size. It's defined, but invalid constant value. Okay. Right now, so these can no longer be constants again because they're computed at. Let me see actually. Yeah, I have to because they're computed at runtime, so I can't define them as compile time constants. Thus Flutter can't really optimize that code as well, but that's the trade-off of, I guess, using media queries. You have to know the device properties. All right, so let's take these constant thingies off of here. And so ideally, I would be somehow not having to make this many changes even, but by sort of encapsulating these in a single composable or a couple of composable widgets, as everything is called in Flutter. Getting close though. Keep cooking. How long am I streaming today? Yeah, probably I'll be working probably another hour or so. Yeah. Till I get fatigued. I haven't had lunch yet, but maybe I'll. Or actually, I had protein pudding for breakfast. Man, today I haven't eaten much. I should think about that. All right, cool. Almost there. Now let's see if it runs. Looking good. I think our conditional logic is in place. We will run the app. Hopefully it'll run by default in my iOS simulator. And the dark mode might be kind of cool. Challenge accepted. Create app in 1 hour. Okay. So you're going to do the thumb up and down app in TypeScript? Is that the one? And publish that on GitHub in 1 hour. 1 hour. Where's my simulator? Here we go. Nice. That's a good one. Oh, right. Hey, that's that same spammer, but number 46, version 46. Oh, I see. Yes. Chaos Esports, Twitch, Online Casino. There we go. Now we are banning. Yes, thank you. I appreciate it. Okay, why didn't my thing run? Well, here we go. Try to keep the chat visible. Yeah, I need like just a simple CSS style that I can apply against the chat to guarantee that it's got contrast. I could just do a whole layout shift where I essentially work. I don't think this is necessarily a good idea, but bear with me for a second. If I do my display capture like this and just have a dedicated space, whoops, like that, then I have some room. The problem remains the names. Hopefully the names will be visible. Yeah, this is a sentiment survey where we want to know how people are what kind of experience they had in this community space, and be able to have a little bit more granular insight. Is the goal is to increase diversity and increase female participation and non-binary participation in the space. In the community, it's a community based around entrepreneurs and people who are making businesses and stuff. And we've just noticed it's not a good distribution, not a sort of balanced distribution, you could call it. So the idea is not only we want to know how people are feeling, but then if we know a little bit about the gender distribution, we could see where we are, and then what kind of changes do we need to make to get where we want to go. That's the idea. Measure it. Yeah, it's sentiment survey grouped by genders and non-binary with a non-binary option, and it's a tech entrepreneurship kind of community space. They've got like accelerators there for startups. They've got a lot of resources and workshops and training sessions and activities like just kind of community building and helping people network. It's a really cool initiative, a really cool space, but the balance would look like it would probably look similar. The ideal balance would look probably similar to the actual balance of gendered identities in the community, like in the city or in the country. So right now, I think it's a bit skewed away from the actuality. So I think, for example, what is the approximate gender distribution of people in Finland, taking into account non-binary gender identities? For example, in a binary gender distribution, there may be something like 51% female and 49% male. But taking into account non-binary gender identities in the scope of the country of Finland, what is an ideal distribution that we could aim for in our community space to match the broader population? Yeah, so right, that's the general idea. We would sort of match the broader population. It's my understanding. I'm not speaking for everybody, and there could be other. Those are really important questions, though. Like, what do we mean by gender, and what do we mean by gender balance and inclusivity? Those are really important questions, and it's not just also about gender. We're also wanting to be inclusive of people from different other demographics, like origins. Like a lot of people in Finland have migrated here for various purposes. Even myself. It's a bit tricky. There isn't a single ideal gender distribution you can aim for in your community space to perfectly match the broader population of Finland, simply because people who choose to participate in online communities may not perfectly reflect the overall demographics. So that's another complicating factor, right? Overall population, Finland is a population of 5 million, majority being female, around 52%. Non-binary representation, specific data on non-binary identification in Finland is limited. A more inclusive approach is becoming increasingly recognized. The World Bank, female for Finland is about 52%, limited data on non-binary. So it's basically what we're trying to do is focus on inclusivity and create this optional survey. It's an anonymous survey, it's optional, and it's multimodal. We'll have a kiosk app, a digital form that people can scan like a QR code at events, and a paper form that people could fill in. So we're trying to make it as convenient, and people can choose whether or not to submit it and how they want to submit it. That's just going to let us see where we are. And yeah, that's the question about what's the optimal. I don't know the answer to it, but probably something like, let's say, this is really a guess, but 10 to 20% of people are probably in a non-binary gender identity, gender fluid or something like that. I don't know really what it would be. And then just have then the remainder would be almost split equally. About 52% of the remainder would be women. female versus male. But yeah, it's a very tricky question. And that's what we're doing as a community initiative. I'm just taking like a small step and creating an app. Yeah, that's right. There's many different things that are considered diversity, and gender diversity is just the right now the initiative. The overall mission of the place is to be to be inclusive, and I think it's kind of succeeding in creating an inclusive atmosphere. But the leadership there, I'm just a volunteer. I'm not really on a leadership position. They're noticing that in entrepreneurship in general, and there's a broader recognition that in tech in general, women seem to be underrepresented. So where are we, and how can we change that? Yeah, that's interesting that the Bill of Rights of Canada has that. I remember there was the controversy in Canada around gender identity labels and whether or not it was free speech and things like that, or interfering with free speech. And I don't, yeah, that kind of got it's like a bit toxic, the culture that, the discourse kind of broke down in that area, perhaps. But yeah, I think these are important. You can make it illegal to not use somebody's preferred pronouns. Yeah, that's the thing. And there was some like pushback against that. I forget the dude's name. It doesn't come to mind, but yeah, that was very prominent. Politically incorrect, the opposing stances. Yeah, almost like sexist and tied in with racism and other extreme movements. And granted, both sides of the coin have extreme viewpoints. Yeah. Yeah, it's not a simple thing, is it? And we want to kind of take steps and improve the situation, but yeah, it's like as you can see, the viewers drop off on this stream. Maybe it's just like my stream is not very popular, but every time I describe what I'm kind of doing, I notice the numbers go boop, and like people just go watch some other stream. I don't know. I don't care though. I'm gonna keep doing what I'm doing. But hey, but I think this is looking good. Let's put it in landscape mode. It's subtle, but I think it works. Let's make it extreme, so I can make sure it's working, but I'm pretty sure it's working. Portrait, so landscape, label font size, I think I can bump back to 25. It was like 25 and 25 and 30 or something like that. Landscape padding. And for some reason, these changes outside of the build method don't. These are constants also. I think I can do that. These are compile time constants. They don't cause my app to hot reload. I'm not sure why. There's probably some nuance there. If I make changes within the build function, build method, it'll rebuild. Oh, there we go. Yes, it's working. Yes, it's actually, I would take that back. So the hot reload did work. That's another cool thing I really like about Flutter. This hot reload thing. And try again. It's working. Very good. So let's go with it. Yeah, I think that was another good improvement. How's your to get to a reasonable result? That's really important. How do you get to a compromise when you have people at really bickering extremes? Almost like a lot of hostility emerging out of that. How do we, at one point, allow and foster those viewpoints, but at the same time, without sort of complete censorship, or without, I understand the calls for censorship, and even in Finland there's like some far right parties that have been banned from participating in the political sphere because their views are non-constitutional. They don't I'm not really deeply informed about the idea, but there's these Finland Black and Blue Party, I think is what they're called. That they're not allowed to run for public office because their views on immigration are extreme and unconstitutional, something like that. But yeah, it's like a really tricky situation. Yeah, true. And I don't know how big it is. Yeah, it could be a small far right group. I don't know really the size. I'm kind of out of touch here because I don't speak the language very well, and I have not invested enough time in that. And that really kind of, I'm a bit socially alienated and not able to really, yeah, understand a lot of what's going on. That's kind of why I'm sort of hanging out at these community spaces that are more international, because the English is the auxiliary language there, and then I sort of am learning a lot more about these political and social issues that are arising here, austerity and things like that, and racism and discrimination that is still alive in Finland despite our history of being like more socially egalitarian and having good social safety nets and things like that. So let's commit this and push that change. This is pretty good. I think the overall outcome here is satisfactory, and I can close out this issue. Yeah, culture shock is a bit, yeah. I guess I'm experiencing that a little bit. Okay, so let me see. My issue was number 5. My pull request closes number 5. Looking good. All right. Market is ready for review. I'm the only reviewer, but nonetheless. And keeping it under a couple hundred lines, I think that helps. I don't have any tests, unit tests or anything in this. And I've got some commented out code, so I'm not linting very well. But out of curiosity, just a quick on the stream quality feedback. What do you think about this layout? If I move something like this, can't do that, but something like this, does that make there's a lot of empty space for one. It makes the chat easier to read. The names are still overlapping though. I don't know if that's a good idea. Yeah, I agree. I'm just trying to think of how to transform, fit to screen. How to incorporate the chat. What would be a good idea for that? Anyway, I know it's not a simple thing. So let me clean up the commented code at least. That's generally an anti-pattern to have some commented code. Where did that go? And I'm just not going to work on the screen width. Tablet versus mobile display. I think we've already made good progress. Good. So today I'd like to publish this app. I think at this point I'm in a pretty good shape. There is a feature I need to add to export the data. So let's see if Gemini can help me here. One important feature I would like to add to this application is a data export in CSV format. We're using a data store that has a method allowing us to export the data. I believe it's called, in the Dart ecosystem, it's called Drift. And Drift has a recipe for a CSV export. The data is stored locally on the device, so the CSV file would need to be saved on the local device, allowing users to retrieve it from the file system and, for example, email it to themselves or download it to a connected computer. This is an important distinction because the data is not stored in the cloud, so it could not be accessed remotely. That was one of the original design decisions to promote privacy and anonymity of the data. Please create a GitHub issue for the CSV export feature. Did it get it? So I, at this point, can get initial feedback on the app if it's even a good idea. And if we start taking it into use, it'll be a natural next step to allow the organizations to download the data. You know, alternatively, and I think a lot of these survey apps provide visualizations and various tools to explore the data, and it's kind of like part of their subscription model. And I'm not sure to what extent, you know, without being on like an enterprise plan or something, you're able to even access the data directly. So at least in our first step, we'll just give you the data as a CSV. And then data visualization in the Flutter ecosystem is not as mature as some of these libraries in JavaScript and TypeScript, like even Chart.js, but there's other ones like Plotly. And then of course, Python ecosystem has really great data visualizations. Flutter and Dart, not so much, unfortunately. There's very rudimentary visualization support. Python has great also analysis, aggregation tools like pandas, data frames, and things like that. So I think in the immediate use case would be to have the data in a CSV format that you can take into these other tools, even like Power BI or something like that. And, you know, keep the app very simple. So what I'm going to do, create an issue for that. Here we go. And implement local CSV export for user data, for survey data is essentially what we're doing. Somehow Gemini or Bard, as it was called, it doesn't seem to have as good, maybe, context window as GPT seems to have. To enhance user control over their data and support offline analysis, we will implement a feature to export stored observation data in a CSV on the user's device. Maybe it does. So observation is actually one of the words in this in our data model. Since the data is stored locally to promote privacy, the focus will be on saving the CSV file locally and providing guidance on how users on how to retrieve and utilize the exported data. For example, how to send it to their personal computer for further analysis via the device share feature. Tasks utilize Drift's CSV recipe, research and incorporate the recommended Drift recipe or other suitable libraries for generating CSV data from the local data store. File saving mechanisms. Investigate the file input-output operations in Flutter. Employ appropriate file saving mechanisms that offer compatibility across iOS and Android. Yeah. Potentially desktop, but not initially. Consider using packages like Path Provider to obtain suitable local storage paths. We've already got that. Permissions handling requests to handle necessary storage permissions on Android and iOS. Good consideration. Clear user instructions. Provide in-app instructions or a brief README within the exported file. Explaining the location of the saved CSV file. I don't know if that README would go within the CSV file. That seems weird. How users can access and retrieve the file using their device's file manager. Maybe. So priority doesn't need to be part of the thing. File naming, allow users to customize the file name, perhaps. Export options, consider allowing users to select a date range or specific data fields. I'm going to just take that off. That can be an enhancement. Somebody can suggest that. Benefits, data ownership, yada yada, offline analysis, privacy alignment, very good. Labels, enhancement, good first issue, help wanted. Submit new. Okay, actually, I need to take a break. I think I've been. What's this? Almost 2 hours. It's good to clear my head, have a little bit of lunch. I'll come back and we'll work on either music or continue this app. One goal is to publish this app. I don't know to what extent I should live stream that. I'm trying to publish it on the app stores, Android and iOS. I don't know how much, that would be interesting, or how many private screens I will need to go through during the publication process. I suppose it could be interesting to see how Flutter apps, to show how, and learn myself, how Flutter apps are built, bundled, prepared for distribution on the iOS and Android app stores. So yeah, maybe we'll come back and do that. Cool. It's been another episode of Code with Brylie. In this session, I should just say session, not episode. It's not like Netflix series. Thanks, Dodo. Thanks for stopping by. Maybe I'll hopefully see you around a little bit later. And I want to see the status of your your sprint retrospective tool, how it turned out. If you can publish that to GitHub, it would be cool. We can take a look at that on the stream. I don't have like npm installed or any of that stuff, but I can. If you have a screenshot there, check out the code. It'll be on GitHub. Cool. Yeah, you can share the link. So we wrote a few lines of code today. We allowed the app to have different font sizes, essentially based on the orientation, and we changed the labels to be a bit simpler and less emotionally charged. So it's still a sentiment, and we're still encouraging people to kind of fall one way or the other, good or bad, but we're giving some more gradation to the choice, so a little bit of subtlety. And I thought I cleaned this up. I'll just remove these off stream, a couple of lines of commented out code. And it's basically fixing the original bug where we had overflow, spilling out of the container in portrait mode, and reducing the accessibility of the app. So now we're able to display it correctly in portrait mode and can still interact. Let's make my choices, and that should happen. And change the device orientation, and it also makes the selections everything still seems to be working correctly. There's like a 1 second delay when you make your choices before it submits it. That way it lets you kind of change your choice. And that's it. Our general sentiment surveys, I think, ready for demonstrating to the sort of community leadership. See if it's a good idea, and if so, we will continue with a few additional features like CSV export, perhaps a dark mode to preserve the battery power, and who knows what else. Thanks for stopping by, and see you around the stream. Have a great day.